Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the bridge today. This is our series on grief and loss. And we have Melissa and Bob Stewart with us today that are going to share their stories. Thank you for coming on, you guys. And this is season 5, episode 3. So Sandy's got a quote, and we're going to use this quote throughout this series because it's very, very appropriate. So, Sandy, why don't you give it to us?
Okay, this is by Michael J. Fox. And as we talked about before, he ended up having Parkinson's when he was in his late 20s. And he has been a spokesperson for this disease throughout his career. His comment was, or his quote was, acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means understanding that something is what it is, and there's got to be a way through.
Okay, thank you. Well, Bob and Melissa, why don't you give us a little introduction to yourself, and then we'll kind of start the series with your story.
Okay, you go first.
I'm Bob Stewart, and this is my wife, Melissa, and we've been married next week, 31 years.
Ooh, awesome.
We've got one grandson and one on the way, a grandchild, a granddaughter on the way.
Awesome.
I'm a professional trainer in my work. I do training throughout the United States in telecommunications. And so that's my background. Melissa and I were both high school. I was a high school teacher. She's an elementary school teacher when we got married. So that's her background.
All right.
Yes, I'm a former teacher and admin assistant in a preschool, which I dearly loved. But right now I'm a stay-at-home mom.
And grandma.
And grandma, yes, that's the most important part.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 5 stages of grieving, I'm just going to put them up here for a second. Denial, anger. We talked about in our episode that sometimes anger doesn't always show up as anger. Sometimes it shows up as fear, different things kind of in that hot emotional area. Bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And I'm sure you've been through some of these. I'm sure you have different names for them. But I'm going to try to get us on a different screen. Let's see what we can do. There we go. Oh, that went up to the corner. Is that better?
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, I love that. You're so good.
For me. I've
Look
never
at
used
you.
this one.
Woo-hoo.
Okay.
We always surprise ourselves when things go
Yeah, tell you what, this is all new to us. So, Melissa, when you taught, what grade did you teach?
I taught 3rd and 1st and 5th grade, and then I did a year of preschool. So
yes,
yeah. I love the list.
Sandy was in early childhood, and when I taught mainly 2nd and 3rd grade until I went into adult stuff. So I like those little kids too. Okay, yeah, so we're going to give the floor to you guys, and Sandy and I, you know us, we'll interrupt and ask you questions, but why don't you take it from here?
Well, when you reached out to me about this, I knew exactly where the story needed to go. And because this is something that we've been and still are going through right now. And so I'd like to turn it over to Melissa and let her explain the story, because it's more of her story as a part of our story, because it's related to her parents.
So the year of COVID, we lost 7 family members.
7?
Wow. 7. Not all related to COVID. There were other issues, but it was a difficult year. Wow. The most impactful was my parents, and my dad died August 19th of 21. And then 5 days later, my mom died the 24th. And we had to lie to my mom and tell her that Dad was fine for those 5 days, and because we wanted her strong to come through, but it was a shock. Like within 1 week, I became an orphan, and I think at that time I was such in shock, and you were just doing the next thing.
Right.
You were choosing a casket. You were preparing the funeral. You were trying to pay their bills. You were just doing the next thing because you were just so in shock.
Right.
And I told God, I said, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what to do. And this is the first time I've ever been through something like this, and especially losing your parents is just a huge loss.
Yeah.
Double, and so I put out on the community page for Facebook, I said, this is the situation. Are there any grief support groups in the area? And tons of people recommended Grief Share. And it is a Christian grief recovery support group. And I just thought, well, I'm going to do it because I don't know what to do.
Right.
And so I started that, and that was helped me through the different stages of grief. It validated my feelings because I remember the first thing that they said to me that really hit me was like, it impacts your brain. You can't think clearly. You can't sleep. You can't make decisions.
Right.
And they said it's like you're thinking through Jello.
Oh, it's good.
And that, it just hit me like that because after the funeral and everything was over, I went back to work and I was thinking through Jello.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good analogy.
Mm-hmm. So I even did my job and then realized a month later that I had to go back and redo some things because I wasn't thinking clearly.
Right.
I thought I was, but I was just doing the next thing, and I think in the denial stage, I think it's more of you're just in shock. Your body's in shock. You absorb that in your body, and you are just trying to survive and make it. I don't want to talk the whole time, so if you have any questions.
Well, that's a good way to put it. I like you gave a good graphic of thinking through Jello and having to go back and look at things again when things cleared up, but they don't clear up right away either, but it's better than it was.
Well, and it's tough to have to make decisions that immediately after something like this happens, because like you said, it doesn't come easily and you feel overwhelmed by it. And it's challenging.
Do you have siblings that were dealing with it also, or were you the only one?
It was my sister and I that we both shared the responsibility. Okay. And yes, so we had a double funeral. We had to go through all that and pay for all that, and it was just doing the next thing and just being in shock, honestly.
Had your parents been ill, Melissa?
No, my mom was. She had COVID and she was having trouble breathing. My dad did not have any COVID symptoms, and I had called the ambulance and he couldn't get up. He had fallen the week before, so I thought maybe his back had maybe dislodged or misaligned and he was having trouble standing, and I couldn't get him up, so I called the ambulance. But when he went in, he tested for COVID. He had no COVID symptoms, no coughing, no, he could breathe fine, but they wouldn't listen to me. And they said, we're going to treat the COVID. I said, what about the back? They said, we're not going to worry about that. So then they took him. I never saw him again. Yeah.
You said something that impacts me. You talked about being an orphan. And you know what? My dad passed away when I was 50-some years old. And you always figure your mom and dad, it depends on the family you were raised in, I realize, but oftentimes you feel like your parents have your back no matter what. And I remember when my mom passed away when I was in my 20s, but my dad passed away 20-some years later. And it is a feeling that people cannot describe. You think, I'm an adult here. Why is it affecting me this way? But in my family, I always felt my parents had my back. If something happened, they would be there for me, and then they're not. And there is a grieving in that process, no matter how old you are, if you've had a good relationship with your parent.
It is. And that was the thing is I had nobody left above me, that was older.
Right.
My whole family was gone. We had lost my grandmother in
Wow.
January.
Right.
And so I had no one, and that I can't describe it like you're saying. It's just, they were my stability, my
Right.
security.
Right.
I knew I had someone that I could count on and depend on,
Yeah.
to go back to, and that was gone.
Right.
And so then I'm like, what do I do?
Right.
What do I do? So I'm very thankful that I did Grief Share, because it helped me through a lot of emotions and questions. And another thing too is when you experience a loss like that, it's like time stands still for you, but everybody else is going about doing their thing.
Right.
They're living their life. They're, and you're wanting to scream and say, hey, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced this loss, and time has stopped for me, and working through that too.
Well, and the feeling of being an orphan sidelined me. I had no idea I would feel that way. Did you?
I didn't, but I was not even, I hadn't lost a parent. I just, there was nothing on my radar. I knew down the road, but there was nothing to lose a parent.
Right.
But to lose both of them in 1 week was devastating. My world was rocked.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So that's, well, and it sounds like you did experience some anger.
Yes, a lot of anger.
Or a lot.
One thing that we did talk about is, anger is not a negative emotion. It is an emotion that you feel. You can't deny it.
Right.
It's just through your grief, you do not want to become an angry person.
Right.
You can express your anger. And one of the ways that I did Trauma Reboot too. I'll have to tell you, Trauma Reboot Recovery, it's a great program. But one of the things that they talk about for anger is get physical. If you need to hit a ball, if you need to walk or run, punch a pillow or whatever, if you're feeling that anger rise up, then do something physical to help you get it out. And the one thing that kept going through my mind is I have a lot of anger, and it's in layers. It comes out in layers sometimes. I'm still working on that because it's a journey. And just don't become an angry person. Don't let it dominate your whole life to where you just walking in public, people just sense that you're just angry.
Right. And that's why it's so important to process through the anger so it doesn't become an internal thing.
Right.
That's really good.
Remember we used to, Melissa, you said that you worked with little ones. Remember we used to do that for our little kids. We'd say, let's go kick a ball when somebody was angry, or let's punch a pillow. I remember redirecting children over and over throughout my career to finding a way that they could express how they were feeling and get it out of their system.
True. And run's a good one. I'm not a runner, but kids do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I personally, I'm one of those anger swallowers, so I don't express it, so that's a lesson that I'm still learning, how to identify it and do it, but that's good. So Bob, just for a second, what were your reactions as you were watching Melissa go through these stages? How did it affect you?
Well, I have to be honest with you, it's kind of two pieces to it, because one of them is I love my in-laws. It was a big loss for me as well. They've been a part of my life for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge loss for me. Finding texts on my phone from my mother-in-law asking how things are going, because she was very good at doing that. She was always a reassuring person. That was gone. But the second part of it was my goal was to be that strong person that Melissa needed during that time.
Mhm.
which is hard for me to grasp from my mental perspective because I'm a fixer
Mhm.
and I want to make things right. And I
Right.
can't fix this.
Mhm.
This isn't something I could fix. And so I ended up being more of a listener. And that's hard because I want to just say, well, here's what you do.
Mhm.
This right
Yes.
and do
Right.
this. Instead, I had to shut up,
Yeah.
listen, and
Yeah.
which is a lot sometimes for her just to let it out. And
Mhm.
she'll say, and I don't want you to fix it. Just listen.
Yes.
Just listen.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so
Right.
it was hard for me because I wanted to be there in such a strong, powerful way.
Mhm.
And the best powerful way to do that was to listen.
Let her
It wasn't to do
process it.
something,
Yeah.
just listen.
Yeah. So we interrupted you, Melissa. Why don't you keep going with you were angry, you were letting it out. Um, and I'm sure you're kind of still going through some of it. You know, you're getting through some jello already. I mean, you know, even now.
I do have a right to be angry at all the things that went on during the process of my parents' death, the way that things were handled. And then I wasn't able to be with my dad because I was in quarantine. I was on my 10th day, my last day. And we ended up saying goodbye over FaceTime. And
Oh
it was
no.
terrible. And then my mom, yeah.
That's grieving right
Yeah.
there.
So I have the video of him, and he was vented. We didn't know he was vented. So I have a video of him on the ventilator. And Mom, we were able to be with her, but they suited us up head to toe. You know, I was like, I'm not saying goodbye this way. So I took my gloves off. I took my mask off. I'm like, I'm going to hold my mom's hand. I'm going to kiss her, you know, but all of that was just traumatic. And I have a lot of anger because of that. I've processed a lot of it.
Right.
I've done a lot of things like breath work. I've done, I just recently started EMDR, and it's where you watch the light go through your eyes. It changes your emotional response to things. I've done a lot of things to process that anger, but there are layers. It's not as intense as it used to be.
No.
You know.
Well, it's really very much, you know, PTSD. You
Yes.
know, you
Absolutely.
have that memory in your mind about what happened and just the emotion in the moment, and it takes a long time to unpack all that, even if it never goes away. You know, so yeah, that's so.
Well,
go ahead.
and you have the 5 stages of grief up there, and it would be nice and wonderful if you officially go through one and then go through the next and go through the next,
Yeah.
and then you're officially done. And,
Yeah,
and you're
right.
not.
The fixer in you. Huh?
And, yeah.
Wish it was a clean and simple
Yeah,
process,
and
right?
it's definitely not. I mean, to the realistic point of Melissa says she went to Grief Share, and that's like a 12-week process. But after the 12 weeks are over, you're not done. And
Right.
to the extent of how many times have you done Grief Share?
I don't want to say.
I think she's gone through it 3 or 4 times.
Well, third time,
Yeah.
but it was like a college try. I didn't participate as much.
But you know what, guys, we have to hear things more than 1 or 2 times. We have to process it, and we have to hear it many times for it to become a part of our toolkit.
Well,
Right?
and you're not at the same stage when you go through it again. You know, so
That's
you're
true.
processing different stuff. But I'm so glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I did not do that I'm really hearing as I go through this is that you need to find a safe person to share with. You know what I mean? And that's not always a family member, you know,
That's
or even a friend, because there's stuff you want to dump and you don't want anyone to share it with anyone else, you know. So that's really good. I mean, if there would be one really important thing to tell people is keep doing it, you know.
Yeah, find a support group. It makes a difference. Hearing
Yeah.
other people's stories, I learned so much. And just it did validate what I was going through, because they would be sharing that they were going through similar things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the things that you want to guard is isolation, because then that plants you in depression and you have a hard time getting out because it just becomes your world. And so definitely it's a good thing to be able to find the right people that you can talk to, and I think we are raised to try to be, anyway, I was raised to be polite when I said, and sometimes you don't feel polite. Sometimes you don't want to try to just be
right.
nice.
That's right. And, and the depression too, I think it's the longest stage you can go through.
Mhm.
I think you're just feeling that, you're processing that sadness. The reality is setting in. I think the first year I thought, well, maybe they're going to come walking through the door. I think mentally I was thinking, well, maybe they're going to come walking through the door and that's just all a dream or whatever.
Sure.
But then I think after the first year, it just really hits you with a deep sadness and sorrow that your loved one is not coming back. And then that's when, I didn't want to become like a depressed person where I could not function, but I had to process that sadness. I had to feel it. I would cry just out of the blue sometimes, and things would remind me of my parents, and I would just lose it. I'd be in a restaurant and somebody would walk in and look like my dad, and I would just, so sorrowful. And I just thought, my parents have been gone for 2 years at this time, and I was like, I'm still pretty sad, and what's wrong with me? And then that's when I discovered Trauma Reboot, and they were saying, there's no timeline for grief, but I kept thinking I was broken because I couldn't go through the stages of grief and be on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And they were saying, you're not broken, you're just very wounded in your spirit. You're just wounded and you just need healing. And so that was very comforting to me, to know that there was no timeline on grief and that I should be further than I was feeling, because I felt very deep sorrow over this whole situation.
Right. It's like a broken heart. I mean, you kind of spill it out, and it's, you need the time and the permission to go through. I mean, and the stages don't even need to be labeled. Sometimes it's helpful, but identifying it makes it a little bit more manageable, I think. But depression is hard because you have to have some tools to climb up from the valley, and you have to. That takes gumption and guts to do. That's why it's so hard for people to get out of depression, because you get in that deep hole, and and sadness isn't even on here, and depending on what has happened, loss is a sadness. Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast today, and Dr. Henry Cloud, who's a psychologist, was talking, and he said, we think people have to be strong, and we put that on ourselves about having to be strong, but it's in the weakness that we are able to heal and know our pain and understand, and then that turns around and makes us strong down the road. But weakness is part of being aware of our humanness, I think. Do you remember doing any bargaining at all, Melissa? Did you go through that stage at all?
I went through a lot of what ifs. I went through a lot of, what if I didn't call the ambulance? What if I had went in and gotten my dad out? What if I had gone and gotten my mom monoclonal antibodies? What if I had, I did a lot of what ifs. In my brain, I was trying to logically think through what went wrong to understand how I got to that point.
Sure.
And that's just human. That's just, you just want to logically go through it. I did that for a long time. And, I know that there was absolutely, under the circumstances, I did the best that I could in the circumstances. Right. And I know that there was nothing that was going to change it, and I have accepted it. And, I don't beat myself up like I used to.
That's right. But that is a cycle, you get to accept. So for maybe 2 hours on Friday, you accepted it, and then you go right back into blame, what if I would have done this, or what if somebody else would have done that? Absolutely.
True.
Yeah. Well, Bob, you couldn't fix her. Have,
No.
have you done any of this process yourself in processing the grief, and then the grief that Melissa's in such pain?
Some to an extent. For some reason, my mind tries to go quickly to acceptance. I know that's the fixer in me, because I want to say, well, it was fixed, it was done, I get
Right.
it.
Right.
And so I tend to go
'Cause you're
quickly to that.
And that's almost denial,
It is. It
No,
is. And so, but a part of that was me trying to reassure her in the
Mhm.
process, because one of my big things early on that I remember saying to her quite often is God knew that they wouldn't want to see how bad things are really getting, because during that COVID time period, it got really bad. And I said
Right.
he took them before they had a chance to have to deal with how bad things were getting.
Yeah, and that's almost bargaining, because I know I did that with my dad. When he died, I thought, oh my God, I'm so glad he's not here to watch this, to see this happen. But yeah, that's very, very typical, I think. But pretending it's not there is, kind of a fixer's thing too. So,
It is.
Melissa's going to watch out for you, so you can go through some of these stages too.
He was a really good listener. He honestly, he didn't know what to say when I would break down. I had a really hard time with losing both of them. Like I was like, God, you could have just left one. You could have left one. Why did you take both? But honestly, my mom would have grieved herself to death over my dad's being gone. So I know that there was a reason for that.
Mhm.
I just, I really have a lot of questions for God, on that.
Yeah.
And Bob was really good to just listen, and he would hug me when I would just sob, and didn't say, he was a man of few words, which, is what I needed at the time. And so
Right.
Yeah.
I'm thankful,
Yeah.
Well, there's some questions that we don't get answered on this side of
I
heaven.
agree.
We don't know.
No, but you can find certain places that help the situation.
Mhm.
And for us, that was going to the beach,
Mm.
because I know that's a place that for Melissa is a comfort area.
Mhm.
And so we've taken several trips, and now that our sons are on their own, and she's been able to travel a lot more with me, so,
Right.
which has been therapeutic for us.
Sure.
definitely.
Yeah. And it's important to find those comfort spots. We talked a little bit in our podcast about this, about Maslow's hierarchy, starting with that safety and comfort. And it's important to do that, whether it's in your house or in a spot, so that you can, allow yourself to progress up to, and then the fact that you are talking to others, that community piece. And there are so many comforting verses in the Bible about broken and spilled out, that, God's mercy, and that, it's okay to just lay it before his feet, I think I like Isaiah for that, get some of that comfort verses out there. But Melissa, you have come a long way, and you continue to process. And I'm thinking that you have a lot you're doing it today, but you have a lot to share with other grieving spirits. Not everybody has the background that you have to share with others, because, or the compassion. And I thank you so much for doing that today, because you're helping many people just by telling your story.
Thank you. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for my faith in God and guiding me through every step thus far, because I know that there were particular times when I didn't want to leave this earth, but I didn't know how I was going to make it.
Right.
So I'm very thankful to the Lord for that.
Yeah. And I think of I don't know the scripture where it talks about the Lord has our tears in a bottle.
I was just thinking of that. I'm like, every time I cried, he put them in a bottle. His bottle's got to be big.
Yeah. And he honors that, and he's there with us. And like you say, I don't know how people survive without knowing Jesus, but it's very an important part. And so anything else?
Well, and that was the thing that I was mentioning about the reason I mentioned the beach was one of the things Melissa always says is God lives at the ocean.
I do.
And so I was making sure we could get there so that she would feel a little extra comfort in that.
Yeah.
Right.
And so for us, that's a big thing. So when we go to the beach, that's a big part of it. It's not just, hey, there's beach, there's water, there's sand, but it's an extra way to connect with God.
Well, it's big. The ocean is bigger than anything we can fathom, and so is God.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I want to go to the one takeaway, but we've got a really good verse that goes, a quote that goes with the ocean. And you can share with us, how this lands on you. Grief is like the ocean. It comes in waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes it's overwhelming, and all we can do is learn to swim. And you guys are swimming, and that's that adaptation, part of acceptance. And, if you swim for an hour today and then you go back to start all over again, it's okay, because it's a process. And you learn something new every single time. So, yeah.
And I think exactly what Sue was talking about is that when you've experienced these things and you have processed it, and even if you don't feel totally strong on the thing, you're there to help somebody else going through their stuff, right? You have some wisdom that they don't have because you've walked that path. So you can be of use to other, you can help other people.
That's true.
I think on the acceptance I think that you're at somewhat of a complete, I don't want to say you completed grief, because you're still going to carry it with you, and you learn to carry it with you. But I think it got to a point where now I can think of my parents and all the happy memories, and I don't think of the tragedy and all the things that I went through. It's happy memories.
Yeah. And that's what Dr. Cloud talked about, is that it's PTSD until you get through it and loop through it and talk to somebody, and you can let it go when you feel like you've been listened to, right? It's easier to let it go. And you may have to do that many, many times before you get to that point. But then he says, and it comes back to memory, that you can embrace.
Yeah.
That's
it's hard to replace bad memories with positive ones, but that's what all the brain science tells us now, is that you need to reform those memories, those grooves in your brain, so that you're not dwelling on the negative. Yeah.
Right. Well, and your body will react if you do not take care of yourself emotionally, psychologically, that kind of thing. And I do have to say, I had an experience that I was not expecting. My dad passed away, and I had not gone back to the house where he had built and lived and all that kind of thing. And my first time coming back, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew for sure I was dying. And my daughter had come down with me, and I yelled her name, and they called 911, and it was a panic attack. And it's because I had not processed in a healthy way. And I had no idea it was scary. I just knew I was dying. Never had that happen before. And yeah, if we don't do the steps that we need to do, it will come and hit us physically.
It will. It's in your body.
And it will hit us physically.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And you made such a good picture of saying, within 5 days you became an orphan. That is such a good picture of just, your parents just dropped off the face of the earth, and it's just impactful. That is just so profound.
Yeah.
So let's think for a minute. What is one takeaway from our conversation today? Bob or Melissa, one of you start, and then Sandy and I will do the same thing.
I'll let you go.
You're gonna make me go. That's funny. I like the poem at the end because I didn't mention, but grief is an ebb and flow, and you just learn to live with your grief without letting it debilitate you and keep you from moving forward and functioning as an adult every day. It's gonna be like, I always picture my mom and dad. I just tuck them in my pocket.
Here we go. That's great.
They're always with me.
Uh-huh.
The grief is always going to be there, but you have to process it in order not to let it debilitate you.
Right.
Well, and Melissa, you and yours are a legacy to your parents. I mean, you're carrying on their legacy.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you're making wonderful choices. You know what I mean? Not everybody does that. So
Yeah.
Congratulations. So Bob, what's the takeaway for you?
Probably the biggest takeaway for me is that process. You can label it however you want to, but at any given moment you can be in one or all five, and it can change in a moment's notice.
Mhm.
Right.
Every time I think I see I'm totally good with this, something hits that puts me back in a different one.
Yeah.
And and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the takeaway that I got from it. It's okay for it to not be fixable.
Right.
It's okay that things move back and forth. It is that ebb and flow.
Yeah. Great awareness. Great awareness. Sandy, how about you? Takeaway.
Like what we've said several times, when we have a safe place to share our story, it helps with the healing process. When we have secrets in our soul, when we hide things from others, then we can't be healthy ourselves physically. We have to be able to have an outlet. We were created to be isolationists. We were made to work and live in community. And so it just reminds me how important that is.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of to build on what all of you said, the secrets, the things that you don't share, we're human and we're, sinners saved by grace, and whatever it is that we need to share with somebody is going to be healing. It's like unpeeling that onion and getting to the soft center. We thank you so much for coming on today. What a pleasure. And, I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was lovely to visit with you.
Very nice to meet you, Melissa. You guys have a great family. And when is the new baby due?
October.
Oh, boy.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
A little granddaughter. That's going to be fun. Pink and all those little cutie things you can buy for them. That'll be a lot of fun.
You'll have a girl. I'm a mother of 3 sons. So when, my granddaughters came, I was very happy. So.
Yeah, well, I have 2 boys. I've lived in a house full of men. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you get to bring out
And with that testosterone, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye and thank you.
Bye. Thank you.